Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
All right, thanks for sticking around for the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm Rich Walsh. I'll be joined by Suzie Cole in a matter of moments over in Studio A. And there she is right now getting ready to take your phone calls tonight at 412-575-2600. I'll tell you one thing that I don't like when I see those temperatures that Ray put up there, Suzie. It's going to be about 20 degrees at kickoff. It's going to feel like single digits. I know we're not going to get a lot of snow, but it's definitely going to be cold. And that cold weather could definitely impact the Bengals offense, don't you think?
I do. I mean, we saw how it impacted the Steelers whenever they went to Cleveland earlier this season. There might not be the snow factor, however, there will be that cold factor. And with Cincinnati having a heavy pass game, that could affect Joe Burrow and the gang.
No question about it. And George Pickens was one guy that did not like that kind of weather, that kind of snow. Remember, he was the one guy that spoke out about it and said they lost because of the weather. I think George Pickens, though, is motivated right now. I think he plays at his best when there's some kind of controversy going on. And you heard this whole week that, was it his fault that there was an interception or was it not his fault? Who's going to blame on that play? But anyways, I think he's motivated. I think he'll have a big game. Last time he played the Bengals in Pittsburgh, he had nearly 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, a huge game. I do like the Steelers in this game, but I think this is a prime time type game for a George Pickens huge performance.
Yeah, and I like how you say, he enjoys controversy almost. He has that chip on his shoulder, and I think that we've seen this season. It's almost like whenever there is a little bit of a buzz about George Pickens, he picks up his game a little bit, and he shows why he's on the Steelers team and why he's that, number one receiver for Russell Wilson to be targeting.
But the problem is the Bengals' 2 number 1 receivers, essentially. You saw what T. Higgins did there against the Broncos in that video that we showed during sports. But Jamar Chase is the NFL's leading receiver. Has over 1,600 yards. He has a ton of touchdowns, ton of receptions. These guys are going to be tough to stop, especially when you have a depleted secondary or maybe a banged-up secondary. It looks like Joey Porter Jr. is going to play, and I think there's some optimism that Dante Jackson's going to play as well.
Yeah, getting some pieces back to this puzzle for the Steelers, specifically on defense, which I feel has been their weakest part of their game over the last couple of weeks, especially against 3 of the hottest teams in the NFL. But the defense has to be back on their game tomorrow because they know it's going to be an offensive shootout against Cincinnati.
I don't know about you, but one guy that worries me, not outside of those 2 guys that I mentioned, but is Mike Gesicki. You saw what tight ends have done during this losing stretch. I mean, Travis Kelce, you saw what Isaiah Likely, Andrews both did with Baltimore. And it's the one area of concern with me because it seemed like Cam Sutton didn't know what he was doing on a couple plays or was confused. There was some confusion out there. Now, Minkah Fitzpatrick did say that they resolved this problem. They looked at the tape, and it was schematical issues that other teams took advantage of, but they think they have it resolved. I think that's a good thing if they think they have it resolved because you won't have tight ends that are wide open in the end zone.
And that's another thing. They were working on the schematical things that might have been going wrong over the last couple games, but going into this week, a little bit of a longer break after having, 3 games in 11 days, head coach Mike Tomlin said that it's the fundamentals that are going wrong right now, which at this point in the season, you don't want the basic fundamentals going wrong. So maybe with those all in order and then fixing that schematical problem, the Steelers will be back to where they were prior to the last 3 weeks.
I'm a big trends guy, especially with coaching staffs that have been together for a long time. I think that's where it starts. The Steelers are awful on short weeks under Mike Tomlin. They were 2-9 on Thursdays, which is a short week. But you can add this Wednesday, Christmas Day loss, at least I do, to that mix because it was still a Saturday to a Wednesday. It's still a short week. So Mike Tomlin is now 2-10 on short weeks, but he's great when they have extra days. He's good on Monday nights. He's good after bye weeks. So I think this is when the Steelers coaching staff shines.
Yeah, no. And like I said, I think having that extra time, especially with how depleted the defense was, just the injuries that were racking up over those 3 games in that short amount of time, this, 10 days between games is going to be very beneficial going into this last game against the Bengals and specifically into this playoff push for the Steelers.
Now, Suzie, I agree with you there. I've been saying this for the last couple of weeks here about the injuries. And when I ask the players that they don't want to hear excuses, they say next man up. I get it. But when you're going going from a Joey Porter Jr. to a James Pierre or a Corey Trice. It's just not the same. And it's not the same when you're replacing 3 guys on defense that make an impact for the team. It's hard to overcome all of that. I think that was part of the issue with losing these 3 games. They weren't opportunistic with turnovers. They didn't get any, and they were getting those at the beginning of the season. They're not getting them now. And turnovers at the wrong times on the other side for the Steelers. Russell Wilson fumble was huge against Baltimore. Najee Harris fumble against Philadelphia. Basically, they were just flat out outplayed against the Chiefs. I can't really look at one point of the game where I could say, hey, maybe if they make this play or they do this, that things turn around. But those other 2 games, I thought they were in it up until those points.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the turnovers going in the Steelers' favor at the beginning of the season with the defense, but the last couple of weeks, they haven't had those turnover numbers. Russell Wilson has thrown 2 major pick sixes that I can think of, one against the Ravens and one against the Chiefs, that you just can't have. You think of that Najee Harris fumble. These are things that we weren't seeing from this team at the beginning of the season, and again, you just don't want that right now going into playoffs.
One thing you can't do is throw a pick 6 against the Bengals this time around. They're playing a little bit better. He did it last time. That could have been a penalty there, but it wasn't called. But the Steelers fought back and still won the game. All right, we're going to fight back and take your phone calls. 412-575-2600 is the number. Back in a couple minutes. All right, welcome back to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. It's our GMC tweet tonight, and the Steelers are on TV. Prime time tomorrow night against the Bengals. It's not a must-win situation, but it's definitely they need to win to get that momentum back to snap this 3-game losing streak tomorrow against the Bengals, 8 o'clock kickoff. Suzie, one guy I'd like to see more involved, and I know he was involved a lot against the Chiefs with 7 receptions, is Pat Freiermuth. But when you look back at the 2 losses against the Ravens and the Eagles, he only had 3 receptions. But if you look prior to that, he was on fire. He has 6 touchdowns, but he hasn't had any in the last 2 games. I know he scored against the Eagles, but I think one of the keys to here, you saw what they did against this Bengals defense the first time around, what they used the middle of the field. That's perfect, right? That would be a perfect scenario. Just keep feeding Pat Freiermuth the ball. I mean,
that's what Cassidy Wood and I talk about almost every single week. Why are you not utilizing these tight ends more up the middle of the field, including Darnell Washington? He even makes things happen whenever Russell Wilson is out there getting him the ball. So why are these tight ends not more of a target this season, especially at this point whenever you don't have the wide receiver options that you thought you would at this point in the year?
That makes you think that the Steelers, it's a must to go out and get a playmaker, another playmaking wide receiver next year, draft, free agency, whatever it is, for this offense to work. Let's go to Josiah out in Josiah. Where are you? Sam, where are you tonight, Josiah?
Hey, Suzie, hey, Rich. I'm in San Antonio.
Okay, yeah. That's what I thought, but it wasn't on here. I didn't see it. Go ahead, Josiah.
So, it's all good. I see with the fresh haircut, it looks nice. But I just want to say real quick, Brian Flores, I think the Steelers made a terrible mistake by letting him walk. I mean, and there's this theory out, and I'm pretty sure you heard of it, that Tomlin doesn't really like people to challenge him or someone that can kind of, put pressure on him. I think it's a terrible mistake that they let him walk. Do you agree?
Look, Brian Flores potentially is going to be a head coach again. I don't think it's a terrible mistake to let him walk. I mean, Terrell Austin is the defensive coordinator, but we know that Mike Tomlin is hands-on with the defense. I don't think it's, I think you have it a little bit wrong. I don't think Mike Tomlin doesn't like when people challenge him. I think he does like that, and he appreciates that. I think some of these coaches, and I know some of these coaches, challenge him at times, but he's the ultimate decision maker, especially when it comes to defense. And maybe that's the issue. Maybe he should be more hands-off and be more of a CEO type head coach.
Yeah, I mean, I don't make the coaching calls. Mike Tomlin does, of course. He's going to have his staff that he wants to have. And I don't know if anyone is particularly happy with even the Arthur Smith decision. There's been calls coming in week after week with him, too. But this is kind of in Coach Tomlin's hands at this point with what he does with his coaching staff and how it pans out.
Well, look, the coaches don't play, right? Mm-hmm. The players do. I mean, you can only do so much. And I think Mike Tomlin, I would have given him an A up until that, even after that Washington game. A couple of losses you can question, but that's typical. They have them every year. These last couple games, things kind of fell apart. Similar game type stories, similar storylines with the Steelers, and that's been, I think, the most frustrating thing with the Steelers lately. You know, the miscommunication on defense, not being able to score on offense. Back to your point about Arthur Smith. I mean, I like Arthur as a guy. Maybe he doesn't have the right pieces right now. We'll see if they get a different running back at some point next year, if they're better. If he has another wide receiver, if this offense is more effective. You know, I think with those two pieces, it can be. I don't know about what you think, though.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. The coaches don't go out there and play at the end of the day. They come up with the schemes and what the players have to do and go out there and execute. And that's something that I think people back at home might not think about at times. Yes, the coaches are making the calls. However, the players have to go out and execute the plays that they are given. If they're not doing that, then they're not going to win games, right? So I don't completely put this all on Mike Tomlin and the decisions that he makes. And I do think that some other pieces need to be added to this puzzle in order to be as successful as the Steelers team can be.
Yeah, there's no question about it. They got to score more points. I mean, that's a glaring problem with the Steelers right now. I know defensively, miscommunication has been a big issue these last 3 games. Minka Fitzpatrick said they have that fixed, but they haven't fixed really this offense. It's been in a slump.
Yeah.
They got to make plays. You know, Russell Wilson can't throw interceptions and can't fumble the ball when they have a chance to score in the red zone. Those are critical mistakes that they got to change. Let's go out to Will the Thrill and McKees Rocks. What's up, Will?
Hey, guys. Happy New Year to you.
Hey, Happy New Year to you, Will.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. Just one question about the game tomorrow night. If Justin Fields is healthy, do you see him playing?
No question about it. He is healthy, and I think he's going to play, and I think you need to play him. You know, I've been a big advocate for Justin Fields having a bigger role. I understand we saw a little bit of that, you know, when they lost in that Cleveland game, and I think they used him. He had a bigger role, but they used him in the wrong places. I don't think you use him in a 3rd and 6 situation and have him throw downfield when you had a red-hot Russell Wilson completing every one of his passes. I think they used him in the wrong spots. But I'd love to see a Justin Fields line up as a wide receiver. You know, I've been saying they haven't really done that, and they haven't done it at all, a slash 2.0 kind of thing. I think, I don't know if he can even fit that. I'm sure he can run a route and catch a ball, maybe a little bit of misdirection, something. But they have to put him on the field. He's one of the best athletes on the team.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that too. Again, that's something that Cassidy Wood has been echoing over the last couple of weeks. She's a huge Justin Fields advocate. I think that we have seen Russell Wilson using his run game, his legs, a little bit more as of late. So maybe those are the situations where you throw Justin Fields into the mix and you have a couple of set plays for him to get into the game to shake things up for this offense.
Yeah, maybe bring him in on 1st down or something instead of 3rd and short or 2nd and short when you know it's going to be a running situation. Yeah, throw the other team off a little bit, but I think you need to see number 2 out there at times for the Steelers. Let's go out to Pat in Cecil Township. What's up, Pat?
Good evening. And I was just looking at some stats connected with Pickens.
Okay.
And I think he's ranked around number 7 or 8th in the NFL.
In what statistical category? In yards, I know he isn't.
Yeah.
Well, look, plain and simple, George Pickens, I don't know what he was going to say about George Pickens, but I know George Pickens, he's close to 1,000 yards. I don't know if he'll get it. He need to have a big game. But he also missed a few games. He missed 3 games.
Yeah.
You know, and he was basically inactive for a game earlier in the year where they didn't use him much. But I think he has the potential to make the big plays. They need George Pickens.
Yeah.
They need him out on the field, running routes, taking coverage away. But they also need him to make those big plays because that's how this offense is effective, and that's how the Steelers win.
And whenever you think about it, George Pickens is that big playmaker for the Steelers this season, which is pretty unbelievable to say. But when he's not in the game, I mean, we saw it over the last few weeks. This offense isn't as effective with him not out on the field. So George Pickens is that go-to guy.
Yeah, I expected more of Van Jefferson. I really like Van.
Williams, yeah.
You know, Calvin Austin, I think he's a great slot. Potentially a good big-time playmaker as a number 3, but they need that number 2 guy. They need another guy. They need a clutch guy that can kind of just get open and just catch the ball and run good routes. And I'm not saying that Van Jefferson can't do that, but it doesn't seem like he gets as open as you would like.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I do think that there are some people out there on this team that maybe we don't think about that have been very effective this season. I think that Calvin Austin has been a sneaky good player for the Steelers team at times. I mean, there are other targets out there, but they just aren't as effective as George Pickens. George Pickens is that #1 guy for the Steelers. And then I think Pat Freiermuth is going to be that next target that everybody thinks of that is effective. I mean, look at that. 6 touchdowns is one of our tight ends on this team. So you have to find that #2 come next year if you want to have somebody that's just as effective as Pickens.
And I want to see more of Jaylen Warren out of the backfield. Let's go out to Carter in Bridgeville. How you doing, Carter?
Hey, how are you guys?
Hey, good. Thanks for calling.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about Tomlin. I know that it's surprisingly few good coaches in the NFL because you'd think there'd be a lot of really talented head coaches. So I understand that he's better than most.
Yeah.
But I also get surprised that the nationally they just really praise him so much and don't look at the obvious flaws, that lack of discipline, the lack of assistant coaches that are of a quality, the lack of a coaching tree, and then the continuation of not being able to win a playoff game. It's definitely worthy of criticism. Not necessarily being fired, but it's definitely worthy of criticism.
Carter, there's no question about it. He's worthy of criticism, and especially comes down to the lack of playoff wins since 2017. There's no doubt I agree with you there.
Yeah, and I also think you need to think what is going on with this team for the last couple of years. I'm not sure how many it's been, but why does this happen every single December right before the playoffs begin? Why do these losing streaks happen going into the playoffs? What is it about this point in the season that this team always starts off good, always starts off on the right foot, and then the rails just fall off by the end of the season? Is it the coaching staff and how they structure things throughout the year? We don't know, but a lot of that does come back on head coach Mike Tomlin.
Well, I still think he's the right guy for the job. I have always said if he gets fired, he'd have a job in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. He's one of the best coaches in the NFL. Yeah, every coach has a flaw. His flaw right now is not winning playoff games. Let's go to break.